I'm very happy to welcome you to a very, very special virtual lunch together. Usually we have one guest, and it's always interesting to talk to one person. And today we have many guests, which you're going to hear about. It started off with Sharon Ramsay as a way to talk about just relating, which is really the focus of our day today. And she invited many of her colleagues, which is fantastic, and they're here. So I'm going to just provide our standard virtual lunch introduction and some promotion about some of the interesting things that we're going to be doing the next while. It's kind of our commercial as part of what we do. And then we're going to get going with Sharon and company from all over. So first, as I said, I'm Micah with Leading Edge, and on the screen you'll see many faces, including Emily Porter of Leading Edge, who is our producer and our hostess with the mostest. She'll be there to provide support for you and the Just Relating team if you have questions or issues or anything else. So in terms of what's coming up, this summer, all we're doing are free programs, and it's great to have you join us for this one. Coming up next Monday, we're going to have Martin Anthony, who's a Toronto psychologist who's written over 30 books on CBT, and also really is quite aware of how CBT has changed since he started writing those books. And he's presented in live and webinar programs for us at Leading Edge for over 20 years. So that's July 26th. On August 16th, we have a free virtual lunch with Bruce Ecker, who developed something called Coherence Therapy, which is really looking at the way people change and brains are altered through many different types of psychotherapy. And he's looked at the commonality. Very interesting guy. He'll be with us. Then later in August, we're going to have someone who's led over 450 psychedelic-assisted therapy sessions at Johns Hopkins. Mary Casamano will let you know about that. And then on June 7th is someone many of the people on the screen know well. Sue Johnson will be joining us on September 9th for a virtual lunch together. And actually, Sue introduced me to George Fowler, who's on the screen. And George came up to Toronto to lead a session, and it's very nice to have George with us today. So that's our free stuff. And then we actually do things we charge for, believe it or not, including a whole webinar series, which will begin in September, with the people from Just Relating, with Sue Johnson, with Bessel Vanderkook, Richard Swartz. A lot of really interesting people are going to be presenting webinars. And finally, we've announced something we're doing next February, and sometimes it's hard to think about next February right now in July in the summer, but we have 4 weeks of different workshops in Cancun, at an all-inclusive resort led by people like Bessel Vanderkook, Diana Fosha, Janina Fisher. A lot of great people are coming down to Cancun for weeks where there'll be half-day programs and a lot of time just to relax and really have a good time with great people. So we're starting to publicize Cancun. And of course, whenever you're interested in finding out about it, we have a website and all that stuff. So that's kind of our commercials for today. Just to reiterate, Emily is there for your questions, and we're going to allow almost half the time for your questions. And if you have a question, you can put it in the chat box, and Emily will keep an eye on that. Or when it comes time for our question to answer, you can either use the wave function on your Zoom screen or do the old-fashioned like that, and Emily will be able to call on you and all that stuff. So let me first do an introduction of Sharon, who is a longtime friend and colleague in Toronto of Leading Edge, and really brought this idea and alerted us to what's just relating, which is the purpose of our day-to-days. So first, Sharon Ramsay is a registered psychotherapist in Ontario. She's also a registered marriage and family counselor. She's also former president of the Ontario Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. She's helped an awful lot of people in an awful lot of ways, and she's even going back to school to get a PhD. So if this ain't a Renaissance person, I don't know who is. And of course, she's involved in Just Relating, and she's an international team member. So I'm going to start off asking Sharon about her interest in Just Relating, And then she's going to introduce some of the members of her team, and then we'll open it up to the whole group to join us and to find out about what is just relating. So Sharon, welcome to our screen again.
Thank
You've
you,
been here
Michael.
before.
This time I knew I was going to be speaking, so I'm very grateful.
So, I think it'd be interesting for people to know about your interest in, I know you've been an innovative therapist. You've written years ago about radical hospitality. You've had other approaches. How did you become interested in EFT to begin with and attachment-focused therapies? And what were you doing before that may have led you to see the value in attachment-focused therapies?
Okay, so I think the short answer is that I had seen an article. So I was doing my final placement as an MF, a marriage and family therapy student, and I had read perhaps the now defunct magazine Saturday Night here in Canada. And in that magazine, Sue Johnson had an article about EFT. And as I read that, I felt my heart go strangely warm. And I convinced my then supervisor to have a road trip with me and my 3 other internship colleagues. We went down to London, Ontario, and spent a weekend being introduced to Sue and her work in EFT. And what I can say, I can see myself in that auditorium right now. And what happened for me was my interest had always been in how do people relate? Why do we do the things we do? But my undergrad training was all about rats and mice and monkeys. And as much as we're all creatures, I'm not a rat. So Sue's work was situated in intimate relationships. And I found it really quite compelling. So that started my journey with EFT. I had the opportunity to be part of a research project with Les Greenberg as a couple therapist. And I just kept following Sue. Some might say stalking, but I wasn't stalking. I was following at a respectful distance. And emailed her and asked her about things and started reading and going to everything that was happening between 2001 and for sure 2006 to get all of the pieces put together. And then life takes over, right? So I had young children, I was teaching, I was pursuing all kinds of things, but EFT stayed in the backdrop. It attached to my systemic spine as a marriage and family therapist, and EFT gave language to the emotional realities that happen in relationship. So we fast forward now to the summer of 2020, where you might have heard it felt like the world was burning. And in particular, as a Black woman, it felt like things that I could take for granted here in Canada. I feel quite safe. I have not had overt experiences of racism, but I had been in places and spaces where other parts of my identity were questioned. I remember once being in a workshop where someone had said, "Oh, we heard you worked at a Bible college. We assumed you were incompetent." And for just like, hi, how are you? I assume you're incompetent kind of thing. So there are pieces of who I am that don't always get brought into discussions of clinical work. They're not in the textbooks. They become a place where intuition has to take over. And I was kind of getting tired of that. I want my whole self to be in the session. I look forward to welcoming the whole client as they have it, who they are, where they live, what is seen as an issue of pride in their life, what is seen as an issue of shame or fear in their life. I want to welcome it all, hence radical hospitality. So in the process of talking in an EFT forum about my wants and desires for clinical work, I met Catherine McKay. And Catherine McKay, who's part of the team, invited me to join something that I believe George and Carla, rather, who is not on this call today, but George Fowler is, were doing. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm happy to walk through doors. I'm happy to have an opportunity to contribute to the field, because I believe that as therapists, we have this tremendous responsibility to actually see and hear our clients. We have this tremendous opportunity to get to meet people, maybe on one of the worst days of their life, maybe to hear what they wouldn't often share, maybe even to witness the emergence of that new idea that could be transformative in their life. So my introduction to Just Relating was really a chance to meet with people who, quite frankly, are kind of famous. Like Ilana Katz is kind of famous. George Fowler is kind of famous. And together figure out how can we use our clinical training, our interest in people's relationships to include all the differences that make a difference, that we can pay attention to the intersections of gender and gender identity, sexual orientation, religious upbringing, where you live, what's the cultural makeup, that all of that is not an extra or a muddying factor, but is actually really important to people choosing and walking towards healing and wholeness in their relationships. So there is my long answer of how I ended up with this fantastic international group.
Well, why don't you proceed and tell us about your entry to that group, and then whenever you'd like, introduce the other members of Just Relating who have joined us.
Okay, so for everybody who's got their screen on and can see, can I introduce my team members first, and I'll tell you how I popped in. So I'm doing it in terms of who I can see. So Ilana Katz is in New York, and she is a member of our team. Sadaf Shalchian is in California. She's a member of the team. George Fowler, who currently right now is in Arkansas, but typically hangs out in New York, a member of the team. Catherine McKay is in Florida, another member, a psychologist from Florida. Peter Muwachi, who is in Zimbabwe. And so we have to try and make sure that when we meet, we don't have Peter up at all hours of the night. I think that is everybody. And there are some folks who are not present. And those would be Carla Rather, who is born originally from Georgia, but now lives in Southern California. J. Steve Heron, who is also in California. And am I forgetting anybody? Team, help me out. Have I got everyone? Hiro Sasaki, who is in California as well. And we've had other folks from Iran. We've had folks from other parts of the States. I am the lone Canadian on this team. And I can tell you, these are some very friendly people. So we are in good hands today. I would say that our coming together, the unifying factor has been we are all EFT therapists at various places in that journey. The other unifying factor is we want to bring together those differences. We can, as you can look at our faces, you can see we are of different ethnicities. We live in different countries, different languages, different gender expression and sexual orientation and religious affiliation. All of that is part of our group, and we're wanting to use all of that richness to find ways of creating safety in our clinical work. Also, we want to be able to seamlessly, with compassion, ask people about how their life, if you like, in the street, what happens on the day-to-day, influences their relationships. We've had to struggle as a group to try and find common language and work across disciplines. We've had to slow down sometimes when the clip of our English leaves someone behind. We've had to circle back and repair where we have not been as attentive to one another as we could have been. But through all of that, we have developed Just Relating as a, I can be a little boastful in here, as transformative healing practice, to develop an acronym of what the moves are. What are you paying attention to as a therapist? And how do you use those moves across modalities to then engage with your clients and have the conversations that really need to happen. So yes, here we are. Anything else you'd like me to say, Michael, before we?
Well, why don't you, just carry on in however way you think will best let people know about Just Relating.
Okay, so one of the key themes of Just Relating is sociocultural attunement, meaning that there are differences, how we live, where we live, how we move with our bodies in time and space that can influence our experience of well-being, individually, relationally, and societally. When we talk about sociocultural attunement, that's societal piece. What are the roles or expectations, the take it for granted rules that influence people's lives? And how do those things influence our intimate relationships? We want to be able to move in that space and talk with folks about that. So you might be familiar with the work, say, of Dr. Ken Hardy, where Ken talks about racism a lot and how we can't ignore it, and the ignoring actually can be quite silencing. So we as EFT therapists were curious about, so how do we actually have these conversations? How do we attune in the moment of the clinical conversation to create space for talking? This is a big lens. Sociocultural attunement is a big lens, and it invites us to attend to the intersections of power, equity, and justice, not as a sidebar, but as this lived experience that we want to bring forward. And so there are a couple of things that I will say before I turn it over to Catherine that are important for everyone here to know about our team and this idea of sociocultural attunement. As therapists, we are not neutral. We are active and intentional, working with these ideas, these experiences of justice, equity, and power. And we want to know, where is the client? Is anything they're bringing up, does it fit? Or is there something that we need to talk more about to get to the real heart of the matter? We are working continually to connect the dots that people have brought forward. And I think you will hear this both in Catherine's tape that she'll be showing and also in Peter's tape, that there are hints in the clinical work. And as a just relating team member, we want to hold on to those hints and demonstrate that we are able to hold it and make space for the conversation. We may not always get it right. We're willing to be there with the client. It requires us to be really vigilant about our own social location. What are the things that we take for granted and assume are just the way it is? So that when we encounter differences in another person, rather than saying that can't be, that's wrong, how do we work with our own self? What are the reflective pauses that we take that then give life to that interaction with the client? And these things are happening here and now, right? So you can imagine sitting with a client who maybe is telling you their story for the very, very first time, and the ideas are coming together like puzzle pieces that are dropping. What's it like to pick up a puzzle piece and try and see if it fits somewhere, without telling the client it must be this way or it can't be this way, but asking if I'm putting it in the right place? How do they respond to that? And based upon their response, how does that inform my next question, my next affirmation or validation? How does it really become a mutual process of finding our way in the clinical work? This may be the last thing I'll say. I lied. Sorry, Catherine. The last thing I'll say is that I believe there is a transformative power in being seen and heard. And as clinicians, we have this awesome opportunity to see and hear people. And we want to make sure that includes those differences that make a difference. Those things that make me, me, and you, they get to be in the room. So that is my great big swath of how I got here and why I feel quite privileged to be part of the Just Relating team.
Thank you, Sharon. That was wonderful. I don't know about you guys. I love when Sharon kind of shares her heart and her mind. It's so brilliant and thoughtful. And I think you hit it right on the head when you talked about kind of the ability for us as clinicians to help our clients be seen. And in order to do so, there needs to be some work we do on our end, right? In terms of creating enough space, enough curiosity, and being grounded enough in our recognition about where our limitations are, our struggles, our own social location as we go through that. So the work that, little clip that I'm going to show is a couple that I had the honor of stepping in and working with for a short period. We had 2 sessions, as one of the other therapists as part of our group, Carla Rather, works with them primarily. But this couple was generous and wonderful and open enough to allow us to come in and do a consult regarding this process of helping them kind of navigate their way through issues regarding race, regarding religion, regarding issues of dominance and power as it played out in their relationship. So I'll tell you a little bit about the couple before we go into it, and then we'll kind of pause the tape and then talk a little bit about what ideally we were trying to hold and really highlight as part of the Just Relates model. So this couple been married for a number of years. They have 2 children. They both identify cisgendered and are heterosexual, and live in a pretty kind of upper middle class place in their life right now. Not always been the case, but that's where they are right now. They are both ethnically Egyptian and identify that way. And the man in the couple also identifies as African American. The woman has been, as she says, kind of in the sheltered space in her world where race has not always been on the radar for her. She's always identified first and foremost as an Egyptian woman, and really has used the term, I think she said, white approximating. And really, as they've married and had children, has been considering and really discovering a little bit more about her own racial identity. So that's the backdrop. And really the piece that I'm going to kind of show you here really kind of impacts the, I want to highlight the impact race and religious discrimination, oppression, feelings of marginalization has, not just on the individual, but also in the couplehood. And the husband, for the majority of their life together, has been on that front stage, dealing with issues of race, dealing with issues of religion. They both identify as Muslim and have a little bit of a difference in terms of their adherence, full adherence to their faith. But it's been something that's, I know, has been woven into their work at different places. So what I would love to do is kind of ask you, as you're watching this with us, just kind of noticing first, just kind of grounding yourself in your body, noticing what it's like, anything that may hit you. I know for me, when I'm working, I try to pay a lot of attention to what's going on in my core, right? What's going on in my breath, right? So I'm from Jamaica initially, but spent most of my life in New York. So I've become a New Yorker in terms of my fast pace. And I know when things start revving for me, what that means, as opposed to when things are slower, when I'm more deliberate with my thoughts and with my body. So even as you watch this, we invite you to take that kind of a stance, because as we're walking into other people's lives, you recognize that our own issues, our own histories may get activated and then impact the way that we can lean in and be curious. So I am going to try to share my screen as effortlessly as possible. Give me half a second here as I try to find the right window. There we go. Okay. So in this segment, we've been in session for about half an hour, and Carla is also in this session, is working with Ahmed, working through some issues, identifying the places where racial trauma has really played a large role in his sense of feeling not. And it's an interesting experience as a woman of color. I can identify with a sense of feeling watched but not seen, right? Under the police spotlight, feeling but not really seen for an individual in who I am.
Do we talk about it? Of course. I mean, I think we've talked a lot less lately, in general. It's so hard because my whole life I've really been trying to honor, or as part of my life with Ahmed, I've tried to honor his experience, not only the racial trauma, but also the religious one as well. You know, Ahmed was very much thrust into the spotlight post 9/11. And I think, and really that's where his so-called, you know, fame rose. I mean, that's where, when he was on TV nonstop. And so I think something does also happen with Ahmed when crisis occurs. Either one of the religious variety, the religious or racial crisis in the world. There's a sort of awakening that happens that I've witnessed in him. One that's used very positively and productively through his teaching, through his writing, through his being. I look to him, I've always looked to him for that sort of counsel and education. In the meantime, it's it always feels like whatever is happening in the world, which is real and worthy of every human's attention, will always take precedence over the mundane that I'm living with on a daily basis. So there's this sort of, it's almost a numbing that has to happen from me as well to the world, right? To all this that's happening. Like when I see, I already forgot his name, Dwayne, is it the one, the 20-year-old that just, Dante. I see it as a mother first and foremost. You know, I feel those experiences as a member of a family, and it hurts in that way. And I feel a sense of, you know, selfishness too, that I think like, but we're still here. We still have, there's still, you know, mouths to be fed, taxes to be paid, mortgages to be paid, life to be lived, friends to enjoy, music to dance to really loudly. Like, I'm still trying to hold on to that, like for dear life. And so it's hard. I don't know why I always get emotional when I say my naming is I just got my second dose 48 hours ago and I was completely knocked out yesterday. So I'm kind of just coming back.
I know that feeling. But I hear the emotion as you talk about this, Yasmin. And there's some places where I hear how this becomes, I can see it and I can understand. I've been there supporting Ahmed, and when these things occur in the world and his alarm system goes off, you see, he becomes alive, right? This is where the threat alarm comes up and he knows it's a dangerous world and I have to navigate it, and he goes into that mode. And at the same time, you recognize, I almost lose him then, right? Because now the things that are big on the world scene, the things that are life and death, like so critical for us to have in our lens, means that I don't have him anymore in the same way, like the mundane, the life that we just walk with. I lose my partner, I lose my lover then. And I see the emotion that goes with that.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think the mundane will ever compete. I mean, it shouldn't compete, right? And when you say you lose your partner, your lover, I feel like it's not a up and down. I feel like there's always crisis in the world. There's always, I mean, even early in our marriage, and he always had two phones, you know, pre-social media, pre-everything. And he always felt like he had to be on his phone because something was always happening. He was always working. Sorry.
No.
I don't do that like condescendingly.
No, I totally
I'm
understand. No, I totally understand.
It's always there. It's always there. So in this, I'm hearing that it's not just when these crises come up, because there's always, but there's something where I hear this longing in your heart that I want to be seen in his eyes. I want to make him alive in that same way. I want that energy towards the mundane that happens in life with me.
I'm honestly just tired of feeling like a disruption.
You feel like a disruption to
That, yeah, and I named the vaccine thing because it's kind of fresh. Like I was knocked out cold yesterday. Like I physically like couldn't get up, and that basically never happens to me. And um, I don't want to put you down, like, especially Catherine, I know you're new to this group. Like, I'm not, it's very important to me that Ahmed is seen in the best light. Like,
this is it. So I hear it. Can I just leave him there? Because I hear this tender place where you're holding your husband. It's not that I want to put him down. It's that there's this place where I long for him. And at the same time, can I even voice this? The place where I would long for you without it meaning that I'm either putting you down or I'm saying that these crises, these world events. Sorry about that. I heard a noise. I was just about the place. So as we kind of pause the tape there, I wonder kind of just to kind of take a moment to reflect, as I said, is what's going on in your body, in your being, as you heard this woman talk about this really, really delicate line she's walking, right? That she's hearing, she's not at all lost at the impact of the traumas in the world, racially, religiously, how they impact her. Even the reference she was making, she couldn't remember the young man's name who had been killed in the recent police shooting, but Ahmed holds that in his mind, in his heart, and how there's this space where can I compete with that? There's always something on the outside of this world that's always competing with your ability to be present for us together in this space. So the emotion was right under the surface there for her. And as there was more space made for that, it became more heightened. And then to the point where there was even the space where, can I even voice this directly, right? And the body got really uncomfortable and, got sweaty and a little hot there, because this is where we don't know how to talk about this part. So as we're using this sociocultural attunement process, we're really kind of focusing in on how do we lean in with curiosity? How do we make it safe enough to talk about the things that are the reality of what our couples or clients are walking through, and doing so in a way that allows them to feel seen, even to voice things that they may not have fully, as Sharon, I love your image about the puzzle pieces, to kind of even pick up a little bit of that puzzle piece and look at it in a different way and go, is this something that I could even venture to put down on the table? Is there space within our relationship and our dynamic around that? Mm-hmm. So that's really, I think, a nice little sense of what pulled me to this work, right? Because I recognize in walking with clients as a psychologist in the States, I have this framework about, okay, I need to go in, I need to do this job, I need to do it well, I need to do this well. And there are all these models. I'm trained in EFT as well as EMDR and accelerated resolution. There are all these places, but at the heart of it, like, how do I lean in and make the space safe for people to be seen and to pick up the puzzle pieces to try to make sense of them? And that's what I hope that our little piece here is giving you a taste of. And I know that my colleague Peter has another tape that he wants to show, and Ilana, you're going to kind of talk a little bit about that as we kind of transition and spend a little time looking at Peter's work. But we'll be able to take a little bit of questions and answers later on about this piece as well.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you so much, Catherine. So I have the pleasure of introducing a second piece of work. Sorry, Sharon, did you want to add something here?
No, go for it. Go for it.
All right. So I have the pleasure of introducing some clinical work from Peter Muwadi on our team. And this work comes to you from Zimbabwe. It's a Black, straight, cisgender couple married about 3 years in their late 20s. And we meet them about 5 months into their treatment when the woman complains of gender bias to her therapist. And you get a chance to really, we always like it when the work goes well and our clients appreciate us, right? And now we have this chance to see what it's like for a very skilled therapist to sit with a complaint, with a rupture, and to make just incredible space for his client to, I think at one point he even says, thank you for the gift of giving me this feedback. I don't know if you'll see that part on the tape, but it's a part of what he offers to her. And he makes so much space, welcomes her concern, locates it in the culture in which they're in, and locates himself as a man, that she was in a position of having to bring this complaint to him as her therapist, who was also a man. So I think with that, Peter, I will turn it over to you to share the tape.
Hi, hi, Alana. Do you see it?
Yep, we can see it, Peter.
It's perfect.
Wonderful. Okay.
Fact that I'm there as well.
Yeah.
You know.
I welcome your comments, and it's opened up something else for us, which I think, Charity, we had talked about, maybe you and I, in individual session, and if we hadn't, maybe I'm getting it wrong, but
Peter,
Flip to the slide.
Peter, it's shifted to the side.
Oh, all right.
There's something in
Sorry
that
about that.
about how
Sorry about that.
That's how we know it's a real presentation, because we at least know where the glitch will come up. It always comes up somewhere.
That's
So
right, a Zoom book around glitches. I love it.
yeah.
So let me try to minimize this. Right. Let's try to screen share again. Right. Is it back?
Yes, it is.
Great.
there's something in that maybe, and help me if I'm wrong, there's something in that about how we as Zimbabwean men, Black Zimbabwean men, sometimes treat women and treat our wives, the women in our lives who we call our wives, that maybe like subconsciously or unintentionally, we put them in the back seat. And maybe what you are saying today is bringing up something which we need to be more aware of, that we are equal partners and women should not be in the back seat. Zimbabwean women, Zimbabwean wives should not be in the back seat. How does that feel for you when I talk about it like that, or I bring it up like that?
I actually understand what you're saying. It's actually true. And it's actually more than just Zimbabwean men. I think generally men,
Right.
from whatever culture, whatever continent you go to, women have always been second-class citizens. And they have always been considered as people who don't think as men do,
Right.
who don't have the input that men have. So because of that kind of mindset that's there, a lot of women are not given, they're not given the opportunity to even express anything.
Right.
And over time as well, as women, we've just been used to being in the backseat, not saying anything, not contributing much to, whether it's society or a family or things like that. Men always make the decisions, and it has crippled a lot of women, but at the same time, it's painful because you can watch some things and you can feel, you know what, I think things could have been done this way. Even if you speak, you have to say it a lot of times for people to hear you. But if a man speaks once, he's heard because he's a man. So
Right.
that one for me is something I've never liked. Because generally in our African culture, you grow up like that. Especially as a child, you have no say, especially as a woman. You don't have a say in much. So now to have to experience that when you have now grown and you feel, okay, maybe now someone can hear me. To have to go through that again is really not nice. It really feels like I should just stay there and just be quiet. But again, it doesn't feel right. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Thank you for that, Charity. And at this point, I want to acknowledge my role as a man and in creating that type of environment where your experience, your lifetime of experience as a woman, of not being heard, being put in the back seat, having to say things more than once to be heard, that experience is something else that you have had in our time working together. So I want to acknowledge that as a man and to be more intentional in how we work and maybe slower and look for and hear for times when you want to be heard if I've been missing them in the past. Does that sound th- th- does that sound maybe reassuring for you?
Yes, I would really be happy. I don't want you to look at me as a woman, I want you to look at me as a human being.
Right.
Because once you look at me as a woman, no, I mean, I'm not saying there's
That's great. Thank you so much, Peter. Before I sort of pivot our conversation, noticing there's some questions, but I want to know, Peter, what was it like for you as a Zimbabwean man to acknowledge your inclusion in a group that had felt oppressive to this particular woman? What was that like for you?
I think, like I've said before, as a clinical social worker, it was easy actually, right? Because my background is in anti-oppressive work, anti-racist. So um, the discomfort in my body um, was not really significant. Perhaps what was more challenging for me was finding the correct words to frame and to attune to her, right? So that um, she would have a felt sense that I'm with her in that, and I'm naming this power, right? Patriarchal power. So that was the more challenging bit, and I think that's why I was so slow and deliberate in the words I was choosing.
Okay. And that maybe this question sort of lands as well. Donna's asking, could you clarify her comment, which invited the therapist to talk about this? What did she say?
Yeah, so that's at the beginning of the clip. She says that I was being partial in how I'd been working with the couple. So she names an experience of gender bias and partiality, which had crept into the therapeutic alliance. And I love that question from Donna because if we were to watch the beginning of the clip, it was difficult for her to name this. And she was fortunate to have a supportive husband. But it still, and when she was even naming it at the beginning of the clip, she was giggling, right? She was, self-regulating, and yet she managed to do this. And I think a large part of that is her husband. He supported her in this, and we worked through it, right? There was a rupture, and eventually there was a repair.
Thank you, Peter. I wonder if this is a time to shift for questions, as it's almost 1:45. And as we do that, I guess folks either pop it in the chat or wave your hand. There's one thing I'll say before I turn it over to our participants, that you will have noticed that in our clip selection, we have chosen people who are not white. And I want to say to you that was intentional, because often in our trainings, what gets centered, maybe through access or who the therapist is, are often white middle-class clients. And we are not all white middle class. We come from a variety of contexts. And so as our team, we also want not only to have our faces represent the diversity of therapists that are out there, we want our clinical clips to represent the populations with whom we work, so that everybody has a chance to be part of the clinical conversation. So our way of talking is situated, and you have a chance to see the work. So questions, I think I see Louis with the lovely northern lights in the background. So go for it, please.
My question came by focusing during both tapes on the husband. And I think, Peter, you probably made me see that I had a false impression, but I had the impression that the first husband was supportive, really facilitating her expression, while the second gave me the impression to be distracted and not giving the impression of being supportive, while you see that he is and he was. So I was just wondering, I would have, even if you wouldn't have commented, I would even wonder after the sessions, could this second wife, the second tape, have been paying for talking aloud? So what's your comment? Both also for this first tape, where again the husband seems to be much more in contact non-verbally with the woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's something that does come up in this clip. I guess what I can say is our alliance, they were comfortable working with me, and you saw him yawning and that type of thing. Perhaps I'd gone over a little bit and not checked in with him. I'd stayed with her for a while, but he does that, right? And we have that sort of level of comfort where he'll yawn and do some other things. So I think that's the best answer I can give towards that. But there is then another time where we do circle back, and he gets a chance to respond to the work that I've done with her. We obviously won't see that today, but I was conscious of that. Thanks for that question, Louis.
So it was not only, again, I was wondering while you were answering if it could have been a prejudice in me to judge his attitude, maybe not knowing his culture, or if it's a more normal way to be in session for a couple there. I don't know. If there was a prejudice, I'd like to clarify it in a way. In me.
I love that comment, Louis, because I think it's interesting, because kind of knowing the dynamic between the couples, the man in my clip, later on, he goes on to a place where he became really reactive to her sharing. And that carefulness, that cautiousness, right? So part of what we do, we tune into, I think, from our lens is kind of how engaged is this person. And sometimes that engagement may be engagement, yes, keep going, I want to hear this, or like a scanner of, is this like, are you going to go over the line? Is this too much, right? So there's always this process of, I think, using that curiosity and then checking it to see, does this actually resonate and fit in with the couple or the client that we're working with?
Thank you.
Go ahead, George.
I think really to capture the spirit of this project is we want to watch each other's work so we can learn lessons. And, I think all of us have hearts, all therapists do, to be more culturally competent, but not the tools on how to apply it in session. So, in Peter's case, the wife had to bring up, the misattunement. The burden was on her. So how do we learn that lesson to apply that with other couples, right? So we could be more proactive in this. And that's what we're trying to do here. Like, so Peter, what would you do with another couple now to be more aware of that power dynamics and to check in with that? And
Yeah, I guess that's a great question, George. And I guess that's the work we're doing with Just Relating, right? Perhaps now the thing is looking for an attuned moment, right? To take the risk to name this power that could be in the room. And that takes courage at times, right? And the moves and the interventions you would use for that are what we teach with the group. And we're still learning and growing, especially with our new episode now about how to show therapists to safely do this, both for them and for their clients.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
I know there were a couple in the chat. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Marion asked how the couple framed their presenting issue and what support were they seeking, and that was based on Catherine's video.
And yes, thank you for that question, Marion. That couple initially went into treatment. I know they spoke about it during the consult, where they were specifically initially, the wife was the one seeking, was pursuing the treatment, which is not uncommon at times. But she was pursuing specifically to help to make sense of and navigate around some of the places where they were hitting conflicts. And she recognized, based on her husband's real kind of focus in and importance of race in his life, that she was initially looking for an African-American clinician. And the woman who they are working with is Carla Rather, a colleague of ours, which Carla is a Caucasian cisgender female living in California, so didn't fit the African-American criteria in the wife's head. So she was a little cautious, but knowing that again, the sociocultural attunement piece, right? That Carla's ability to really make that safe, right? The thing that was most important for her is that her husband would feel seen in the treatment. Because if he wasn't going to feel seen, if he wasn't going to recognize that this part of him, that the ability for him to talk about the things that were important, as Sharon's beautiful phrase, the differences that make a difference, that it wouldn't have been a therapy that would have gone well. And she would not have been able to really create a space that was safe enough for this couple to work through some of the conflicts.
Mindful of time, I'm wondering if I can add something about Just Relating that speaks to maybe what you began to bring forward, is that I think throughout, I can say, speak for myself, throughout my training, there have been these statements in courses and in books that we should, ... We should address differences. We should pay attention to blah, blah, blah. However, to do that well, to lean into a should isn't automatic, because we know that how we ask questions let the other person know what we're expecting. So if, for example, someone contacts me and they're looking for me as a therapist, I found that some people will say, we want a Black female therapist. We want someone who is of Christian identity. Okay, but then what is the point of that? What does that allow to have happen? In Just Relating, we have this really cool acronym that you can hear more about on October 4th. But until such time, the first place for us is to reflect. So as you think of the fullness of who you are, what identities, what position, what social location are you comfortable in sitting with and having known all the time? Would you have on your website that you are feminist informed, or that you are trauma informed, or that you are familiar with X, Y, or Z therapies? Okay. Then when you sit with a client and perhaps they say things that you find noxious, or you know nothing about, or you're scared to even raise because you're watching a dynamic again and again and again, what happens for you to allow you to raise it and bring it forward in the session? Sometimes our clients tell us what they are willing and not willing to talk about, but sometimes it's our silence that tells clients what we are willing or not willing to talk about. In an attachment-oriented frame, we are trying to be attuned, like our heartbeats beat together. The look in the eye, the position of the body. We're wanting to use that whole body awareness to reach out to clients and offer a bridge over which we can both pass. So when you're asking about, what about the partner that seems disengaged? What about the issue happening in the street, quite literally, that impacts them? For those of you who are in Canada, what about working with clients, as I have right now, whose Indigenous identity is in the news in ways that are quite unsettling at best, traumatizing at worst? How do we lean in and demonstrate ourselves, even if that's not our identity, to be able to have those conversations and see and hear them? That's what we're interested in, so that our models have to conform to our client's lived experience, rather than the lived experience of the client having to conform to our model and we blow right by. So I hope that in what you've seen, the little snippets of work that you've seen, is our attempt to, in the moment, offer connection and demonstrate being seen and heard. Before we go, team, is there anything that you want to add to whet the appetite of our colleagues here to join us on October the 4th?
I think. Okay.
Oh,
So
go ahead.
go ahead. Yay.
I'll just add a quick bit. I think really just what I want to invite for October 4th, or even just kind of learning about just relating, is that we are trying to create a space where we become so attuned within ourselves, within our own body, within our own social location, and increasing that awareness and knowledge of where we stand and how that impacts the therapy room, how we show up and welcome our clients, what we feel comfortable with, and then how that impacts what the client brings up. A lot of times there's a lot of biases, and there's a lot of just natural assumptions that we might make. For example, if I'm an Iranian American woman living in California, if I assume that that another Iranian American woman living in California would have the same or similar experience, I'm missing there, or I'm missing that other person. And so just relating is really trying to welcome humility, curiosity, and relating. So we talk a lot about how can we relate through our differences, and how can we reduce that that assumption that we make about one another, and how can we create a welcoming and safe environment for people to come as the whole being. And one thing that's really important is to just recognize a lot of people have not named their experience, and so creating a space where they actually tell their create their story, how to verbalize their story, and through that story, how can we relate with one another, whether it be in a group, whether it be in a couple session or an individual session. How can we create that relation through social attunement? Nice meeting everybody.
Thank you, folks. I'm so glad to be here. Michael, I interrupted you, sorry.
No, say, go ahead, Sharon.
I don't know if we can adequately express how grateful we are for this opportunity, and how great it is, for me, how great it is to have the support of my team. We've been meeting pretty much weekly since July of 2020. And it's amazing to me what can happen when we each slow down and try to move forward in a way that invites everyone to the table. So this is a great opportunity. Thank you all so much for being here.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much. And thank you to the team. I mean, there's been so much talk about race, power, gender, giving voices to the difference that make a difference. And I think what you're doing in this project is really giving people ideas and tools. And I thought originally you needed to be an EFT therapist or be an attachment focused therapist. But I think I've learned today that you just need to be a human being who works with people. And you can learn a lot. A couple of things I mentioned before I'll close is that we will send out a video of this session to everyone. If you want to have a look again at those excellent clips, which are so interesting. Thank you, Catherine and Peter, for providing them. We'll also, we'll let you know when the October 4th webinar is on our website, which will be in a couple of weeks. We're uploading all our fall and stuff then. So it's not available right now, but we'll let you know when that happens. I want to thank everyone. I love our audience because there's so many great questions. It's a wonderful community to be a part of. And we always end all our sessions like this. We open all the microphones to say thank yous and goodbyes. And so I'll start off thanking you, Sharon, for putting this all together. Thank you for the team for being here. And thank everyone on a hot summer's day to join us this afternoon. So thank you.
Thank you so